Please rewind this cassette.
Alright, let's talk about it. Transformers, a franchise that might die. Optimus on decline. How do we get into this? Ooh, I like seeing the Cheetor character. You know, when I was a kid, I watched Beast Wars, mostly because it was one of the first things I remember on television having CG animation. The other show I remember watching was Reboot. Now, I've tried to rewatch both of these shows, and while I still like a lot of the writing and voice acting, the animation just looks outright terrible. It's bad. It's really bad. But this video isn't about Beast Wars, although Rise of the Beast is clearly a variation on that. Obviously, we have the gorilla character that Optimus Prime transformed into and so forth. I mean, what happened to this franchise? Obviously, the blame goes on Michael Bay in a big way, also franchise fatigue. You had a franchise here that was billion-dollar grossers, where the third film and the fourth film both made over $1 billion, mostly thanks to China. I would even say that this franchise is targeted more towards China than it is the United States anymore. And even beyond that, it was a big franchise in the United States for a while. I mean, the first, second, and third film all did really well domestically. They all made over $300 million at the U.S. box office. I think the second one made over $400 million. But after the first film, which was very well received by audiences, every film after that just got abysmal reviews. 2, 3, 4, and then 5 came out and didn't do as well, even though the budgets honestly stayed relatively small. I'll give them that. They didn't skyrocket the budgets. For instance, this film cost $195 million. That's really not bad. And I believe Bumblebee cost even less than that. I think it cost $135 million. But then Bumblebee comes out, gets pretty good reviews, 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, makes $468 million at the box office or something like that. Not a huge hit, but not a bomb by any means. But once again, domestically, didn't perform that great. I think it made about $127 million. But here we are with Transformers Rise of the Beast. They switch up directors here. The previous director was known, I think, mostly for animation. This is the director of Creed 2, Stephen Caple Jr., I believe is how you say his name. Now, actually, this film review-wise isn't badly reviewed in the context of the entire Transformers franchise. This is the best reviewed one outside of Bumblebee, I believe, since the first one, because all the sequels got terrible reviews. So there might be some positive fan reception to this movie from long-term Transformers fans who collect the toys, read the comics, watch the cartoons. But still, from Bumblebee to drop to this as kind of the direct sequel is certainly disappointing. How do we go from a film that was generally well received critically and by fans? And I even saw that movie and thought the opening sequence on Cybertron was the best Transformer sequence ever done in live action. I really liked the designs of the Transformers. I thought obviously the movie was the Iron Giant or E.T. remade, but how long is this damn movie? 2 hours and 7 minutes. I like that. I like that it's not 2.5 hours long, but the reviews aren't great. Particularly when you go to Metacritic, the film only has a 41, which is pretty bad. Now, to be fair, Bumblebee had like a 66 or 67. It wasn't great either, but this is pretty bad. A lot of not so great reviews. Lacks the ick factor of the earlier Bay-directed efforts, and Fishback and Ramos do a great job as the token humans, but this is still just silly and derivative. To some extent, each shot is a little more neatly composed, but they're all strung together with the barest visual and narrative connective tissues, resulting in a baffling film that feels strange only not for a modern blockbuster, but for a Transformers movie as well. The only people to feel sorry for in Transformers Rise of the Beast are Anthony Ramos in The Heights and Dominique Fishback, Swarm, who play actual humans trying to save the planet, when in real life they're just humans trying to save a movie. They're fine, but they can't make a dent in the awfulness. Now, there's a lot of bias towards this franchise. Critics aren't big on it, and from the beginning it was never really a loved franchise. Bumblebee is certainly the exception, but I still think with some better handling from Paramount, this could have stayed a more popular franchise, particularly like not letting Michael Bay dominate it for so long. Because did the films make money because of Michael Bay, or did they make money because of the special effects of the Transformers? I would argue it was more the special effects of the Transformers by ALM than it was necessarily Michael Bay as a filmmaker, even though he did a pretty good job on that first film as a mainstream film from 2007. Looking at the box office, the film's projected to have a $155 million opening worldwide. It'll open somewhere in the 50s domestically, is what they're estimating, and $100 million internationally. So with the $195 million budget, this is co-financed by Skydance, you would think that this film should be able to make $500 million, particularly that Bumblebee made $468 million. You would think this film is going to be able to make that. I do question how well it will do. I think there's a version of this where this film plays really well and actually kind of overperforms, and we could see it opening to 60 million and actually doing better. I think that is possible. I also think there's a version of this where audiences really like this movie. But at the same time, we do have to talk about what happened to this franchise. I mean, they really, even from this film to the previous one, the fact that you leave the director of the previous film, you try to lean more on the Michael Bay action aesthetics that were popular before. This doesn't really feel like a direct sequel to Bumblebee the way that I thought it would, like bringing back the characters like John Cena or Haley Steinfeld, continuing that story. It's just the gimmick of, okay, there's the Beast now. We're doing Beast Wars. And that's fine, but I do think you're eventually going to run out of gimmicks. This is what's happened to the Fast and Furious franchise, now with 8, 9, and 10, where it's like, what's the gimmick now? There's a new bad guy, and you guys are doing the same stuff you were doing before. So you get a franchise that was making over $1 billion to where it's making $600 to $700 million. That's sort of where Transformers is at. Now, I don't think these movies are not profitable, and I certainly think they still make money off merchandising from this. But at this point, what's the next Transformers going to perform like? If this one's already tracking to be so far below the previous installments, excluding, once again, I think Bumblebee, do you make a third film and change directors again? So the top global openings for the Transformers movies were 2011 Dark Side of the Moon, $382 million, 2014's Age of Extinction, $302 million, and that's pretty great. The 382 and 302 million, those are pretty great numbers. And with this, I just don't think this franchise is ever going to have another film. I think it's safe to say make $300 million domestically or even $250 million domestically. I think that's done unless they waited for years and rebooted it. So it's going to have to heavily rely on China, Korea, and Japan. And the biggest offshore territories for this franchise, one of them has been Russia, but Russia will not be getting this film, obviously, like a lot of films this year. So we have to take away the box office from Russia. So you have to just hope that this is a giant hit in China and Japan and makes most of its money there, and they can get some kind of total that's surprising. But right now, to me, it looks like $500 million would be on a high end, and you got to think with the $195 million budget, marketing included, not included in that, but let's add marketing to that equation. I mean, they'll probably just break even or even a little bit below that. They're not going to make, there's not going to be $100 million net profit off of this film unless it really blows up in China and really blows up in a couple other territories and makes $800 million worldwide. So you see here, comparing the previous Transformers movie, origin story Bumblebee, is a bit tough because the target of that film was a wider demo than the rest of the franchise. And while deservedly praised by critics, 91 certified fresh on Tomatoes came in lower at its final with $340 million overseas, unadjusted. Also, that was a Christmas release, whereas the Autobots generally come out to play in summer. That's a good piece of information there. But this film, with the critical decline, the financial, the budget being higher on this one, and just in question, where does this franchise go in the future? I don't want to say it's a dead franchise. That's the question of the video, right? Is Transformers as a franchise done? Obviously, the Transformers franchise isn't going anywhere because it's going to continue in all sorts of facets. But as far as the movie franchise goes, I don't think they have much gas left in this tank. And now that they've done The Beast. Now, granted, if this film had gotten similar reception to Bumblebee, maybe the marketing was a little bit better, I think they could have done something with this film. I think there's always potential with Transformers. But I really think this gimmick's run out of steam, and I don't see this having a widespread appeal outside of the hardcore Transformers fan base, which is who supports this. And obviously, other franchises like Star Wars and Marvel and other things are declining as well. So it's not like Transformers is unique in this. Transformers as a movie franchise now has been going on since 2007. That's quite a long time. But I do think Paramount has done a disservice to this franchise. I think they've mismanaged it. I think they've gone in wrong directions. And I think, honestly, they've just not cared about the screenplays of these movies, like, ever. I don't think any of the films have what I would call a great screenplay. And I just think that the lack of care in the writing and developing the human characters in particular, making them more likable and part of the journey as opposed to the Autobots and the Decepticons. And don't get me wrong, I would prefer great Autobots and Decepticons. That's where I think the Michael Bay series was really bad too, is that he just haphazardly threw those characters around and didn't, if you watch the show or anything, you know that Starscream and Megatron have this history. They can be interesting characters and dynamic. It's barely explored in the Michael Bay films. And then obviously the popularity of the character Bumblebee, which is why he was featured so much. I do think this having Optimus back and a lot of other characters and more of the marketing will help this film. I do think the Beast thing is definitely a gimmick that'll play well with people. But I just I don't know. I think Paramount really had something here that could have been a franchise that continued to make, billion-dollar movies, at least for, 6 or 7 of them, and could have just done better. And somewhere along the way, they really messed up. Particularly Transformers 5 really hurt the franchise. That was the one where it was like, oh no, this is not good. So I don't know. What do you guys think in the comments? Do you like the Transformers franchise? Did you like Bumblebee? Are you excited for this movie? What do you think is going to be the box office results for this film? Do you think that they have 2 or 3 more Transformers films in them at a $200 million budget level that can perform well enough? Or are we coming to the end of the line with this? And what are your expectations? Oh, Ron Perlman is Optimus Prime. That's cool. Pete Davidson. No, thank you. Michelle Yeoh. I like how they just always cast these like famous actors to do the voices, and then they're like not even prominent. Well, Michael Phillips gave it a positive review. Rise of the Beast, at least, has some buoyancy, with little of the reactionary American exceptionalism of its predecessors. Okay. 2.5 out of 4. Interesting. Could this be the awakening of the franchise? Let's hope so. So there are some positive reviews here. A lot of people, I mean, they're not great reviews. They're like 3 out of 5s or Bs, but it's a Transformers movie. What are you going to do? A sometimes funny, sometimes touching, sometimes incoherent CGI fight fest structured around a story of family, found and otherwise, and starring a diverse cast. A genuinely entertaining summer blockbuster, with its high point being Pete Davidson as Mirage. Okay. Hey, bro, I'm Mirage. What's going on, bro? I'm gonna steal your girlfriend, bro. Let's go smoke some weed with Joe Pesci. I'm a fucking Transformer. Is Transformers Rise of the Beast awful? No. Is Transformers Rise of the Beast great? Also, no. In conclusion, it's a Michael Bay film with explosions, humanity, robot deaths, and Pete Davidson, which, depending on how you feel, either helps or hinders. Well, how can you do a better review than that?